edition of the Rice Football Blue and Gray preview show. We're here to talk the next game on the schedule. It is another week. We're 9 games into I'll say 12 question mark game season for Rice football. Kind of bizarre that we're already this close to the end of it, but JP, time to settle, time to process. 2-game home stint is over, back on the road. How are you feeling? Well, first, I guess, like the rest of Rice football right now, dealing with a bit of a cold bug, so just trying to get everybody healthy to Saturday.
Yeah, fortunately, this isn't football related. I think this is just the grind of being in California. I say sarcastically. For 2 days
this man works so hard for you, Rice fans. So hard.
All good, all things considered. But as usual, you'll be carrying the proceedings. But glad to be back. This is the great between just all sports. Between October 1 and the end of November, beginning of December, it's just the prime sport watching and listening time as everything's cranked up and going. If you're a hockey nut, I mean, heck, you got World Cup to throw on there this year. It is just absolutely the best, and no complaints here.
Yeah, all is good. This is typically a football show, but we do need to drop a plug. Home opener for Rice men's and women's basketball on Thursday. We got a doubleheader, 2 games for the price of 1, and then stick around, turn up your TV dials, your radio antennas for Western Kentucky this weekend, where, from what I've been told, kickoff is expected to be high 30s, low 40s. So yeah. I was talking to George Nyquil yesterday about that, and I think his first response was just a shiver. And then, of course, we'll play anywhere, anytime, yada, yada. Yeah, I'm like, I get it, but that's cold.
Yeah, cold is cold for this Texas guy. I've got some North Dakota roots, so I have this conversation with a lot of people. Give me Texas, because when it's hot, you can cool off, but once you get cold, you're cold. It's tough to balance those. But yeah, the weird little creature, big creature I am, I've been looking forward to one of these cold games. We haven't had one of these in a while, but I might change that with a text middle of the first quarter to you. And it's a close to noon kickoff at least, so it'll be the warmest part of the cold day. So there's some kind of allegory mixed in there that I can't put together right now. But yeah, it'll be a cool one. But hey, both teams playing it. Let's go.
Well, you're the madman that opens the windows on the press box just to get a little bit chillier. So it is what it is. We're going to talk Western, I promise. One last bit. We kind of went back a little bit for Charlotte. We need to go back a little bit for UTEP. Haven't touched on that yet. One quick hitter, your kind of general overall thoughts, a takeaway from the UTEP game and what amounted to almost a walk-off touchdown from Brad Rosner. Has your heart kind of settled down in your chest just yet?
Yeah, once I shifted back into football mode, and I knew we'd talk about this at the beginning, it was one of those games where it wasn't pretty the whole way, but as crazy. Is that a noise just for me, or did y'all hear that? 5 ties and then the 5 subsequent lead changes after that. Every time that UTEP got back to try to go ahead, they couldn't. So it was a game of not 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 responses. It was 5 times coming back. It was a very slow crawl. It wasn't exactly a shootout, but man, Rice had the better players, and one of those was number 2, and he just continues. He got added to the Bolitnikoff midseason watch list, I guess later 3/4 watch list, and he's a stud on a team of another elite receiver. At least he's played like that in Luke McCaffrey. Rosner is that dude. He's like the first time in 70 years at Rice football that they've had a guy that's averaged as many yards per catch as he had. And TJ McMahon was stellar again. He continues to bounce back. Every time we think, well, okay, maybe we've seen the best of TJ, he continues to match it or maybe even climb ahead, because they needed every one of those 330 34 yards. And the running game is finally starting to see some consistency. Charlotte, forget that one. But starting with La Tech and continuing up through the UTEP game, it gives you hope for the end of the season that maybe they can be the running team that they want to be.
Yeah, I think so. I think selfishly, we wanted to see Rice go 2-0 on the homestand. They didn't. They went 1-1. They split them. But, if that's going to happen, then it's always nice to be coming off the win and kind of seeing some proof positive of, hey, some of the concerns we had against Charlotte, what they didn't do well, they fixed. Like, the special teams was better. The offense was more consistent. The defense had a couple key stops. Some things to work on for sure, but it was better, and they're going to need to be better as we transition into the Western Kentucky discussion, because Western Kentucky is just a really good football team, man. And just to kind of set the stage for who they are, last year it was the Houston Baptist import and offense press go, where Bailey Zappi and I guess it's HCU, right? Not HBU, but the HCU guys came in, offensive coordinator, and then they just put up points across the board, and that's what it was. And Rice did not have an answer for Bailey Zappi. They just didn't last year when they played. And this year, Bailey Zappi is off, literally making plays in the NFL, an NFL quarterback. And what does Western Kentucky do? But they just go pop, insert Austin Reed into this offense. National championship winning quarterback at West Florida. And he kind of came in and was competing with Jarrett Dagey, who right now quarterback at Troy, the all-time active FBS leading passer, beat him out and has just been fantastic this year for Western Kentucky. You're not supposed to lose NFL quarterbacks and just not miss a beat. Like, the best teams, your USCs, your Alabamas, your Ohio States, barely manage. Like, you look at Clemson, like the best of the best, barely manage to do that sometimes. From what Western Kentucky is doing, like, how impressed have you been the look you've had so far at this offense, and then just this team in general? They seem just up there with the cream of the crop in the conference.
Really impressed, the short answer. And the next one is, it should be no surprise, because what they did for a long time, starting with Willie Taggart, and you go through what name is escaping me for half a second with congestion, had Jeff, Purdue coach now. Say it.
Brom.
Yeah, Jeff Brom. I was thinking that. Okay, so I don't feel so.
I gotcha.
But they just do it. They churn out this system, and it works, and it works. And we'll get to the wide receivers in a little bit, but that's no shortage with what Corley's been able to do for them. But I'm a D2 guy at heart. Love the small school stories, and Reed is one of those guys. I mean, he threw for 409 yards against Charlotte. So a little backstory. My Saturday morning was a little bit different, obviously, because we played Thursday. And I wanted to flip on my buddy Randy Lee. I listen to the broadcasters and my friends when I can. So I flipped that on Saturday and was like, what? Huh? It was 28-0 with 13 minutes left in the second quarter. And the first selfish thought is, what the bleep? Are you kidding me? Rice just got routed by Charlotte. And in Western Kentucky, the Owls' next opponent is doing that to the Owls' previous opponent, with UTEP, of course, sandwiched in the middle. I know the transitive property doesn't work in a reality.
Final score of that game was 59-7, by the way. Western just blew them off the map.
A squeaker. So yeah, that was my thinking, like, oh gosh, what's going in what's coming up here? And then the lead up to us talking right now, everything I've been looking at is they are as advertised. This is going to be a test of the highest order for the Rice Owls secondary. That's been solid this year, but they have been struggling lately. Let's be brutally honest, Gavin Hardison did not test them the way Austin Reed is going to test them. And this running back core too is very solid as well.
Yeah, the entire offense, it really felt like just replace and keep rolling. And it's interesting because Rice so far in their Conference USA history has victories over every single team in Conference USA except for Western Kentucky. Rice has never beaten Western Kentucky as a member of Conference USA, and unless we expect, added trips to Bowling Green, Kentucky, and over the next couple of years, which I don't really think is going to be happening. This is Rice's last shot to get a win in the win column against Western Kentucky. Also of note, if you go look at the conference standings right now, UTSA is 5-0, North Texas is 5-1. Then right below them, WKU 4-2. Right below them, Rice at 3-2. So this is the number 3 and the number 4 team in the conference standings. And, I think it was interesting that somebody asked Bloomgren on Tuesday during his media availability about like the bowl game question. And, you need one more game to get to 6 wins. And he's like, that's great. That was one of our goals. Like, we really want to win this one to get to 6. He said, but that's not the only goal that was on our goal board. Like, we want to contend for a conference championship, and this team is still alive for that. And that kind of adds some added, I don't know, not angst, but some excitement and some energy for this team as they go out there. I think it's going to be interesting. You look at how much of an impact is having George Nyaqua back in the secondary do? What sort of things are they going to be able to do? Because you look back at the Charlotte game, and what happens if the offense is just 30% more functional and doesn't put the defense on the field the whole game? Like, can you see some go around? So there's a lot that Rice has to do to turn these around. One more thing on the Western Kentucky offense, that they've been able to run the football, which I think has made them even scarier on this side of the ball than they have in years past. The past couple years, it's been like, we just don't even care. We're not even going to try. Like, why do we need to? Western has been able to get things going on the ground. They've had a couple different running backs that have stepped in and been productive, and they're not world beaters. This is not a North Texas rushing attack or something that's going to be able to blow through things. But as I'm saying, I'm trying to pull this up right now. But they've been really good. They're 5th right now in the conference in rushing and averaging upwards of 5 yards a carry.
Mm-hmm.
That Rice wishes that they were averaging 5 yards a carry. And this is a team that is committed to throwing the football, that is also running the football at the second highest or third highest clip now in Conference USA.
Yeah, my it's this operator error here. I'm not able to get the screen to share Bordy at this point, but essentially the names you talked about were, as far as sharing the running game, Davion Irvin Poindexter, hyphenated last name, Robichaux and Sanders. They run it some from Jakari Moses, but the main attention comes to the receiving game, with the main guy being Malachi Corley, that just set a sophomore record for receiving yards in a school that's had a lot of really good sophomore receivers. He's hopefully the Owls can hold him under 1,000 for the season, but he's got 865. He had a monster game against Charlotte. And you were talking about George there. They know the Owls defense noticed the difference without the big bad wolf over the middle, as Coach Bloomgren rightfully calls him. They noticed when he didn't have the safety help against Louisiana Tech. I think it was really exposed against a phenomenal quarterback in Chris Reynolds, and they kept picking on one side of the field. So having George back will make a big difference there in that Owl secondary at just the right time for the blue and gray. So I think that'll reap big dividends for the blue and gray.
Yeah, it's going to be huge. And, we didn't mention Dawood Davis has been really good as well for them at receiver. Joshua Simon quietly is, I mean, he might be the second best tight end in Conference USA behind Jack Bradley. And I don't think that's particularly biased. I think Jack has been awesome, but it's basically those two who have been productive in all phases of the game. And he's a guy that is a touchdown machine, and they look to in the red zone a lot. So they could beat you a couple different ways. He's got a good quarterback. Offensive line has been solid. Oh, look, that's us. Just so many
Seeing Bordy now.
dudes. I got you, Bordy.
Okay. There are other ways to do this, I found out. But yeah, there's the receiving core on the right side. I can't get her to move over here. But there's the backfield, and Reed is he's that guy. And I was the part of the game I was listening to, I mentioned earlier on our opening rant there, that Simon set the career record for tight ends touchdowns at Western Kentucky. And this is a program that has had some really good tight ends, Higbee being the most recent one. I think he's still with the Rams out there. But yeah, this is it's going to be a tough offense. I think that is keys number 1 through 115 of this game. Find a way to deal with this Western Kentucky offense. And I meant to say this earlier because I was trying to dig up the actual margin as you were talking about not playing them again, right? So 49-10 was the first game. 46-14 was the second one. 42-21 was the closest game of the three. And that was played in Houston last year, where if you remember, I'm sure we said it, you can go back in the archives. That one really was not all that close. Of course, probably Captain Obvious, but was not really indicative of a 21-point game. So this is a rivalry that is, if you can even call it a rivalry, it's a series that has been totally dominated, and it has not been a good matchup in the past. And going into this game, Western Kentucky strength goes against what the Owls have been struggling against recently. But the good thing this year, and the big difference is, the Owls have been tackling a lot better in space. We'll just see if Reed attacks where we think he might attack in this one against the Owls secondary.
Yeah, and I think just the one kind of caveat that goes over all of this is some of these teams that Rice is seeing this year versus last year, and I'm trying to remember what game it was leading up to that. Maybe it was the Charlotte game. Maybe it was UTEP. I can't quite recall. But Bloomgren essentially said, "Is like, yeah, it's a rematch, but we're not the same team that played last year. The secondary last year, they were missing, had some injuries, and the young corners that Rice was leaning on at that point are a year more experienced. So, we'll see. I think it's not easy, but you'd rather them be where they are now, especially if they do get George back, than where they were last year. So
yeah, 100% agree.
That's a plus. And then you turn over to the other side, and this is the part that it's crazy, man, because Western Kentucky, and you think Tyson Helton, and you think former quarterback's coach, they're going to throw it around the yard, yeah. The offense is going to work. It does. It's great. But the defense, that's been the part that was the question mark last year, right? Coming into the season, even before we knew how good the offense was going to be, was, well, can they find enough guys? Can they hit the portal and just plug and play? And they were able to kind of do enough last year to be right up there with UTSA for that conference championship, getting in close. And this year, they're probably better, honestly, on defense. And this is, not a team that you were kind of pigeonholing to be that elite defense team. But you're talking about number 1 scoring offense in Conference USA, number 2 scoring defense in Conference USA. You just look at just the league games. Western Kentucky actually leads all Conference USA teams in league games, allowing 18.7 points per game in conference play. And 18.7 is just, it's a stunning number, because this is a defense that has already played UTSA, has already played North Texas, has played UAB, has played a Charlotte squad that hung $1 billion on Rice a couple weeks ago. They've played some good offenses, and they are shutting people down.
Yeah, and the number one name that jumped out to me, you have your routines, and I go down, and the name I remembered was Juwan Jones there on defensive end. But they've got this sophomore linebacker, Jacquez Evans, that he is a dude and a half. So they're feisty, they're mean. Hey, big late breaking news here. Having a mean defense is a good thing. But they're really talented on that defensive side, as you poured out the digit so eloquently there, brother Matthew. But yeah, this is a defense that is really. I'm not saying worried, but as I talked about earlier, the Owls been able to show some life with the balanced running game. I think the Owls have found, okay, Cam Montgomery is going to be our one guy. We have the role. And hopefully Ari Broussard can get back in the mix sometime here soon. But with Juma and then Uriah West, that we saw him finally score a touchdown, not to his own lack of abilities. He's obviously a great player, has been in the past at Jacksonville State. But yeah, the resurgence of Juma Otoviano, and that's a great story too, by the way. Just the attitude he has shown with that too. I seem like the broken record, but if they can take some of the pressure off McMahon, that will no doubt be from that Western Kentucky defense. And Cam Montgomery against USC, Cam was the type of guy that the USC guys were chasing, So can they draw up the X's and O's in a way to get Cam in space? And for him to break one wide, he's something special to watch in the open field. And then Kobe Campbell to some degree too. He just hasn't had the reps, respectively to his position that Cam has had. But yeah, Juma, Cam, and then mix in a third back in there, whoever that would be. That is the path I see to the Owls trying to get this win, and it would be an upset, I believe. But the Owls have done this before. I forget who I was talking to this week in amidst my basketball prep and recovery, but they've done this. They've done this before. They've gone on the road and defeated Marshall when no one thought they would win. They've gone on the road. They've defeated UAB when no one thought that they could do it. And I'd imagine outside of the Patterson Center and those of us close to the team, nobody thinks that they can go in and win this game. But there is a path to do it, and it starts with that running game.
I think that's one piece. And then I think the other piece, you talk about those other monumental road victories. Obviously, that Marshall game with 5 interceptions, that'll help. The UAB game, I think even back to the one on the road would have been last year, where UAB's first play from scrimmage was a fumble.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of set the tone. This is interesting. Western Kentucky leads the nation in forced turnovers, which at some point you're lucky. At some point, this is just kind of what you do. They forced 10 fumbles. They have 14 interceptions. And oh, by the way, they've scored 5 times on defense.
Yeah.
The offense is good enough. The defense has scored in half of their games so far this year. That's wild. And that's something that if you talk about you building that recipe for an upset, or at least building that preventing utter chaos, you can't turn the ball over. And this is something that Rice has continued to lose the turnover battle. I think they've been +1 in a game in turnovers, I want to say once this year.
Mm-hmm.
I have to go. I should have that in front of me, but I remember looking that up.
Game. It was the Gabriel Taylor pick. I'm 90.5% sure of that one, but
no, I believe you're correct, because I think other than that, they've had a couple evens and then a lot of negatives. That's what happens when you turn the ball over a lot. But Western Kentucky is a defense that is going to make you pay for those mistakes. We've kind of seen, and we talked about at the beginning of the show, right? TJ McMahon has continued to progress and be better and better and better as a passer and as a quarterback, using his legs, kind of captaining this offense and setting his playmakers up for success, of which Rice has a lot. It's going to come down to controlling the football, because if you take a team that is really good on offense and if you take their offense off the field, it's harder for them to score points. Breaking news, JP, if their offense is off the field, they will score less points
I like
my bold proclamation. But that's going to be part of it. This is a defense that has been really good. They had a pick six last week in their win over Charlotte, and I mean sometimes it's that simple. You got to look at some of the guys that have been really good. I can't say his name. Probably Halase, Khalif Halase has been there for. He's I remember as a former Oregon guy, transferred in last year. Leads the team with 8 pass deflections, and then he's got 2 picks. Caleb Oliver 2 picks, Upton Stout 2 picks. Then you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys with an interception apiece. So they are going to make you pay if you are not where you're supposed to be. And then another thing that's made them so good, and Rice talks about this too, about the combination of rush and coverage. So the secondary has been good, but maybe stout to play on name words there. But the pass rush has just been superb, and Rice has played a lot of really good defensive fronts this season. And I think for the most part, as up and down as the offensive line has been, they've kind of held their own. I think what you saw them last week against UTEP, and some of the Jadrian Taylor had a big play, a big sack, but other than that, they were able to keep TJ upright. And actually, one story, I was talking with Bloom yesterday at practice and about the offensive line and kind of that matchup in this game with the WKU defense, and he drew me back to the 3rd and 8 completion to Isaiah Esdale against UTEP that kind of extended that game and set up the go-ahead touchdown score. And Bloom just said TJ was back there just cooking a steak, like had all the time in the world, and got the ball downfield and got the score. So I think that's going to be a matchup that's notable. Anything else that is kind of you're looking down? You mentioned Rice, the underdogs. They're going to have to do something right. What's 1 or 2 things that you have on your list that you think they have the capacity to do and get there?
Pull that thread of yarn first before I get to that about the offensive line. How I had Sanders Davis on the Mike Bloomgren show after the La Tech game, thinking yes. And they just hadn't had any consistency because of different injuries and moving guys around. They had a couple in a row. And then the last game, you had Isaac Klarkowski move up to center, and then Shea Baker moved back over into that left guard spot because I believe it was John Long, top of my mind. He didn't come back on this short week. So I started the answer saying it could be more about the offensive line consistency, but that's the one thing they've been consistent on. They've had those shuffling of the lineups the whole season. So coupled with that, and Juwan Jones is a bad mamma jamma. He is a dude there at defensive end, and he's got a lot of other teams' focus. So getting ahead early, I'm also going to break some football news here and saying getting ahead early is a good thing. Yeah, scoring is better than not scoring. That's what I have cooked up here in the office. But
let me write that down.
Yeah, and take a note at this one too. Those middle 8, coach talked to past kudos due to Jason Metco for filling in for Nate last week, and he went down and talked to coach. It worked out that other teams do it. Rice finally did it. They played the last 4. Your Dabo talk about it all the time at Clemson, and the first 4, that middle 8, voila. And that was a big difference in the game for them to be able to shift things. So there's always those hidden points. And with the way Van Sickle's been playing, I will say, yeah, I'll stick with the early start. I'm not going to give you 19 answers. I'll say establishing the running game, the news flash of scoring more points than the other team, but also not just those silly moments that come up in a game. You're like, well, that's not good. That's not ideal. You can't have any of those on the road against a team that could very well be in the conference championship game or winning the conference championship game if you don't beat them. So settle down, run the ball, and get a lead early. and have them catch up to you, like we saw the formula with UTEP. But my brother, this is not UTEP you're playing. This is Western Kentucky, and it'll be a huge challenge coming up here in cold. Already shivering. A hot tea.
You're right, and I will leave us on this one note, kind of and we've talked about it on the show and off the show and just amongst ourselves. We haven't really seen a game this year where everybody's got it going on for Rice on all three phases. We've seen the opposite, the Charlotte game, where literally special teams, offense, defense just did not show up. We've had games, you go look back at FAU, where the defense was just like, against a good quarterback, we're just going to clamp down and not let you score, punch it out at the goal line good. And then we've had games where, the offense is clicking and scoring. I think, even with the field goals, that's kind of what it looked like against UTEP. The offense didn't really do much wrong, even with the turnovers. So at some point, just by law of averages, they're going to get a game where at least 2, maybe even 3 phases are working together. And I don't know, man. I don't think we've seen this team's best yet. And at some point, it's got to happen. At some point in 12 games, you have to put one game together where you just play well. And I don't know if that's enough to win on the road against a team this good. My hunch is it might be, given what we've seen this team do before. But down the stretch, they need one more game to get to a bowl game. And one of these games, they're going to put it all together. And it's going to be fun. If nothing else, and I'll close on this. I asked Bloom last week after the UTEP game, selfishly, I'm like, are you just going to let me be bored once this year? Just like wrap the game up at halftime. Let me sit there in the press box and just chill. And he said no. So however this games go, we'll see. But I'm excited, man. It should be another fun one. We'll see what happens. Rice has a quarterback. They got some dudes that hopefully have their team healthy enough to go, and should be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
I can't wait. I got to start packing the cold weather gear now. At least cold by our shivery Texas standards.
Amen. All right, man. We will we'll sign out. That's us for this week. We have, I guess 2 more of these to go and change, maybe 3 with the bowl game. We'll see. But
yeah, next week, I guess this is more of an off-air talk, but I will be flying back from Nashville after Rice basketball. So
no excuse. No excuse. Be in 2 places at once, JP.
We'll figure it out.
We'll find a way, as we always do. But for now, this is us this week. We'll sign off. We will see you next week. Off for one more Rice football game as we go. But until then, Rice fight.
Never dies.